Are you looking for affordable office space in Marion? The professional building located at 685 Delaware Avenue is the place for you. For more information, call 740-383-6803. Office space is now available. Again, telephone number 740-383-6803. This is Scott Spears, and today we're going to recount the life and times of one of Marion's favorite citizens, Martha Douce Maniaci. She has run for office, been Grand Marshal of the Popcorn Parade, raised $90,000 for leukemia research, and opened and operated her own dance studio for nearly 70 years in 2013 here in Marion. Today, Marion's First Lady of Dance, Martha Douce Maniaci. Martha, how are you?
I'm wonderful, and I just love to spend time with you, Scott.
Well, Martha, we've had a lot of good times over the years.
Yes, we had, and I'm sorry I didn't know you when I was 10.
I wasn't around yet, Martha.
That's 70 years ago.
70. Well, speaking of 70 years, next year, we're taping this in 2012, your dance studio hits 70 years in Marion. Did you ever think when you started 70 years ago that you'd still be here doing this?
Gosh, surely not. When I was 12, I was a drummer, and I went to Baldwin Wallace College. And when I took my drum lessons in the morning, in the afternoon, I went down and I saw Roberta Calderwood, the teacher that teaches all these little girls how to twirl a baton. And I went up to her and I said, Mrs. Calderwood, would you let me twirl? I think I would love to do that. She said, well, sure, I got an extra baton. So she let me twirl, and Scott, I just did wonderful. And she said, Martha, would you help me? I want you to be my assistant. I said, Mrs. Calderwood, you're making me very happy. And then when my mom came after me 2 weeks later, she said, Mrs. Douce, I want you to take Martha home, put an ad in the paper, Martha Douce starting a baton studio, limited number accepted. And she did. My mom did that, and she's the reason I am where I am.
Nearly 70 years ago. When Mrs. Calderwood put that baton in your hands, were you a natural at it? How long did it take you to pick it up?
2 weeks.
If somebody were starting to learn baton today who's seeing this, what advice would you give them?
Well, I want to tell you what happened. The other night, one of my students, Maryland's students, came up to me and she said, Miss Martha, I'm in the 8th grade and I'm in the Pleasant High School band because you taught us how to dance and how to twirl. I can twirl a hoop baton. She said, and I get a B in the senior band at Pleasant High School. Well, last year on Wednesdays I taught 2 little 8-year-old girls, and I said to their mother, Joy, will you ask the band director if they can twirl with the band in 2012? She says, yes, I'll ask them. So she told me, she said the band director said yes, they can twirl in 2012. So I got little children being in a senior band. Isn't that neat?
That's very nice, Martha. The legacy continues. I want to go back, though. For the record here, when and where were you born? What year, where were you born?
Mother's Day of 1931. My mommy was 41 when she had me, and my brother was 21 years older than me.
You were the youngest.
I was born at 204 Reed Avenue, not in the hospital, in the house. I walked down Reed Avenue to George Washington School until I was in the 6th grade.
You've been in Marion now for 81 years.
Yes, sir.
How have you seen it change?
Oh, Marion is a wonderful place. It's the best place in the whole wide world to me. I can't stand the thought of thinking to live any place else from Marion, Ohio. It's a wonderful place. Charlie Evers is here. Marianne Solarzik.
Mary Ellen Withrow.
You're not kidding. She's wonderful.
Martha Douce.
Yes, and Mary Ellen Withrow's daughter is taking tap lessons from my daughter Marilyn.
It just continues, generations.
And I bought Mary Ellen a T-shirt that says Douce Mom.
You know, Martha, that's something I want to talk about. You were really a great person when it came to promotions. You came up with a song for your dance studio. You came up with the word Douce. You used to do big full-page ads, Martha's Corner. Where did that all come from? What made you so good at coming up with that stuff?
Well, I just got ideas from my mother. My mother was a school teacher at age 16 in the one-room schoolhouse on Irving Schutz Road. In those days, you didn't have to go to college. My mother taught me an awful lot. She gave me ideas.
What was your father like?
Oh, I was born in 31. I found a registration paper that he was in real estate in 1932. And my father was everything. He was a farmer, and he bought a company, and guess who he sold his company to?
Who's that?
Baldoff Construction Company.
Is that right?
My father started Baldoff Construction, Scott.
Ah, how nice. Martha, what high school did you go to?
None other than the best high school in the whole wide world, Harding High School,
And
1949.
And you were drum majorette.
45, 6, 7, 8, 9.
How did you get that position?
Well, I took all those lessons when I was in the 7th grade. I taught, and I got better and better every time I taught. I was in the Eagles band at age 12, and after I started teaching in the backyard of my parents' house on 197 South Prospect Street, right across the street from the firehouse. I practiced all the time in the front yard of 197 South Prospect. Every time I dropped my baton, the fireman across the street yelled, "Pick it up, Martha, do it again." I was raised with that. That's how I got so good, because of those firemen.
And did you have to audition to be a drum majorette, or did you just, they asked you to do it?
I don't remember whether we did or not. Dorothy, did we have to try out?
I did, but I came on board later. I've been at another school.
That's right. She was from Kenton, Ohio.
Martha, did you ever want to go to college?
Well, I went to Baldwin Wallace when I was 12, and I had so many students. I taught, my first recital was at junior high school, Edison, on Bellefontaine Avenue. And then I had a recital every year. I went to the Palace Theater, and I just loved the director of the Palace Theater. When he sold all the seats and redone the Palace Theater, he said, "Martha, will you sell some seats for me?" They were $250 a piece. The aisle seats were $350, and I talked my dad into buying one.
So the name is up there.
Yes, Elmer J. Douce. It's on the back of the seats. And I rented the Palace Theater off of that man for $750. Now it's over $2,000.
Times have changed.
I go to Marian Catholic where it's air-conditioned, and it helps the Catholic school system.
Martha, you started teaching in the 1940s. Do you remember the first year you taught dance, what you charged the students?
I sure do. I ran across the ad in the paper, and I said $14 a month.
Is that right? That's not
I
bad.
used to charge 50 cents a half hour.
Well, the price hasn't went up too terribly much over the years.
Well, we charge $25 registration fee now that I never used to. But Maryland and all the teachers, I have 6 Central Ohio studios and 1 Southern in Cincinnati. And my teacher in Bucyrus drives down from Cleveland every Thursday, and she wants to start a Douce studio in Cleveland, Ohio, so I'll have 8.
Wow. Did you ever think the little girl from Marion was going to head up 8 studios?
Well, I had a lot of help from my father-in-law. He purchased a car for Joe Maniaci in 1948, Chevrolet convertible, for Joe's graduation. And I was 16, and I wanted to drive that car and start studios in Sycamore, Ohio, and Upper Sandusky. And I said, Mr. Maniaci, could I use the car? He said, well, sure, Martha, I'd be glad to let you. So he let me do that. I got up early in the morning, drove to Sycamore, Ohio, 10 miles north of Upper, taught from 8 to noon. I ate my sandwich going back to Upper Sandusky, got there at 1, taught till 10 p.m. Drove home to Marion and got home about 10:30, took the car back to Joe's house. He lived at 656 South Prospect Street, near where you live, on the corner of Curtis Court and South Prospect. Mr. Maniaci was one special father-in-law.
I want to talk about the Maniacis here in a second, Martha, but a lot of people don't know you also studied voice.
Piano and voice.
Piano and voice. Now, how did that all come about?
Well, my mother was a vocal teacher. She sang in the choir of the Epworth Methodist Church. And she was an alto, and I was a soprano, and Dorothy and I sang with that church. I was a member of Epworth Methodist from the time I was 2 years old. It was a beautiful nursery room they had down in the basement, and my parents and my grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. R.R. Douce, sat in the same seat every Sunday. They were wonderful Methodist members.
Are you a good singer, Martha? Did you become a good singer?
No, I didn't. I walked from 197 South Prospect Street when I was in the 7th grade. That was when I was twirling, too. I walked to 265 Bell Fountain Avenue, and I bought that house. I went in and I stood right where I did when I took vocal lessons. I took lessons from Mrs. Emily Moore.
What was it like to take vocal lessons? What did you do when you stood on that spot?
I stood like this with my hands cupped, and I sang, and she had me. I took for about 2 years. But then I went to play drums, and I fell in love with the percussion section.
Can you still play drums?
Sure can.
Really? When's the last time you picked up a drumstick?
Well, my mom and dad bought me a set of drums. You sat down and pounded the drum, bass drum. When in the band, in the Harding band, I was a concert band, the orchestra, and then I marched as majorette with the marching band. But I played drums like crazy. I played timpanis, bass drum, snare drum, triangle, chimes, marimbas.
Wow, Martha.
And
I bet people don't know that.
My husband was up in the balcony while I was playing the bass drum, and Bill Flanagan was playing the snare drum, and he says, Martha, see that boy up in the attic, up in the balcony? He wants to walk you home. I says, Bill Flanagan, you tell him he has to ask me himself. And Scott, he never did ask me. He was opened the door, and as I walked out, he followed me. So he went home with me, never asked. And that was the day I met Joseph Maniaci.
When did you know, Martha, that this was the man you wanted to marry?
Well, listen to this. When I drove his car at 16, I said, Joe Maniaci, I want to tell you something. I want you to drive me to Columbus, Ohio, and learn to do ballet, ballroom, jazz, and tap. If you do that, I'll turn Catholic for you. And I got to have you turn Republican. And he did.
Now, Martha, now what's it like to go from Methodist to Catholic?
Wonderful.
Do you like being Catholic?
Oh, there's nothing like it. I raised all my family Catholic. I've had Father Fury as one of our best friends. He was out at the Christian man, a priest out at Correctional Institute.
Tell me about, why was being Republican so important that Joe become a Republican?
Because I'm not a Democrat, but you know what?
What's that?
I vote for Democrats all the time.
Really?
Dan Russell, I'm voting for him. And that Mayor, Scott Schertzer, I wouldn't vote for another man in the world than Scott.
Well, there you go.
You
So,
know how many Scotts I know?
quite a few.
8. You're one of them.
I'm your favorite, though, right, Martha?
Yes.
Have we got
you and Scott Schertzer are pretty close together.
Okay, as long as I'm in first place.
You are.
Martha, if you were giving, because back in the 1940s, women certainly didn't run their own business. You were certainly a pioneer in that field. What made you successful?
Well, I loved baton twirling. I just loved it. And when the weather got cold and I couldn't teach in the backyard, I went up and I asked the man that was head of the Eagles department if I could rent a room on the 3rd floor. He says, no, you can't rent it. You're going to get it free because you're our drum majorette. So I didn't have to pay rent.
Has it ever been work for you, Martha?
Well, when I was pregnant, it was kind of rough.
But you taught.
Oh, yes.
Did you ever do any other kind of work in your life?
Yes. When I was a senior, I had a trip to Shelby, Ohio. I worked in a place over there. It was like our Army depot. And I rode every morning with this man that took 6 of us to work over at Shelby, Ohio at a depot. And I worked there. And I come home and taught.
Did you like working another job?
Well, it didn't last too long, Scott.
Why is that?
Because my students I had so many students, I ran out of time. I taught from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock every night.
Now, Martha, we skipped over something, and I want you to tell this story because I think this is something else people don't realize. Before you decided to open up permanently here in Marion, you and Joe were married, and you were on a cruise ship. And you had an offer to do something else. Talk about that.
Joe and I went to Dance Educators of America. I got involved with Dance Educators of America through Viola Cruz. I rented a bus, and a Greyhound bus, 52 seats in it, and I drove them to Cincinnati, Ohio, for several years. And Viola said, Martha, I want you to be the Midwest Regional Director of Dance Educators of America, including Illinois, Indiana, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio. And I want you to be the head of it. So I did. And Joe and I got involved by going to Waldorf Astoria. You know that hotel, the finest in New York City?
Absolutely.
That's where DEA held all their workshops. We went to New York. We danced with the waltz and the cha-cha. We went to the World's Fair, which was in New York City, and we won. And the man that ran the competition said, Mr. and Mrs. Maniaci, I want to ask you a question. I want you to go up and down the Atlantic coast on a cruise line, and I want you to do that. I need a good couple like you people, and tell me in the morning. Joe and I stayed up all night asking ourselves what on earth we wanted to do. We were married July 4th, 50. This was 1951. And we stayed up all night, and I decided, Joe, we're going home to Marion, Ohio, and raise children. That we decided to do. But boy, wouldn't that have been fun? I always think, wouldn't I have been wonderful? But if I'd done that, I wouldn't have my children.
Do you ever regret not doing it, Martha?
No, I'm so happy. I've got 26 grandchildren because I had 3 girls and a boy.
Absolutely.
That's better than dancing.
The only thing for you, I bet, that's better than dancing. Want to talk a little bit about your husband? For so many years, he was JoJo the Clown in the popcorn parade and around town. How did it come about that he was going to do that?
Well, I saw Flippo on the television, WBNS. I had Flippo come up and do Christmas shows for my students. I rented the Leader Street Union Hall where we had our dances for 25 years. And he came up, and I told Joe, I said, wouldn't it be cute if you did that and I wouldn't have to pay Flippo? He said, well, yeah, I could do it. I said, let's do the parade. I used to do floats. I did floats by having chicken wire put on semi-trucks and then put napkins, lock it in. And they were beautiful floats, just gorgeous. And one time I built a float so big I couldn't get it out of the city garage out on Kenton Avenue. I built it so big I had to take the door off, Scott.
Martha, what makes a good dancer?
Rhythm.
Rhythm. How do you...
You gotta have a left and a right foot. They gotta walk in the Douce Dance Studio on the Martha's Corner, Gerard and Bell Fountain. And if they take their lesson, they got 2 left feet. I can't do it. They need a left and a right foot, walk in the studio, and give me an hour, and they'll dance out.
They'll dance out. What, at 81 years old, you still teach dance from time to time?
B&B, ballroom and baton.
Now, why is that, Martha? Why do you still teach at this age?
Well, it's awful boring sitting over by yourself in your house. No man. All I got to do is watch television. I like to talk to people. Can you tell that?
I can tell it, and I think that's a good thing. Were you always a people person?
Oh, yes.
Something I think people should know if they don't. For how many, I can't remember how many years, but for years you had the Mike Rollins leukemia dances. Raised $90,000 for leukemia. You have a plaque down at Children's Hospital. How did those start? Now, how many years did they go on?
Well, we danced in the 60s and 70s, and the 80s.
About a 25 year.
We had a dance club after Joe learned how to do ballroom. We had a dance club, and we had a lot of people as members. Every 4th Saturday, we had a dance at the Union Hall on Leader Street, and we had officers run the club. And the first Mike Rollins dance, I called Mr. The teacher of Harding High School's junior-senior prom. And I called him and I said, Mrs. Mike Rollins' mother called and said to me, is there any way I could raise some money for Michael? He's going to pass away soon. I said, well, Mrs. Rollins, I'll be glad to help you. Let me see what I can do. So I called the teacher and I said, is there any way that we could borrow the decorations from your junior-senior prom? He said, well, yeah, if you teach us how to do the Grand March. I said, well, I know Joe and I have done that a lot of times. I'll be happy to do your Grand March. I did that for 25 years.
$90,000.
$90,000, and down in the second row, second floor of Children's says Mike Rollins Leukemia Research Lab.
How old was Mike Rollins when he died?
8.
Terrible. Did you ever get a chance to meet Mike?
No.
Never did.
He was serious when she called me.
Do you know why she called you?
I don't know. I never found out.
Are Mr. and Mrs. Rollins still around?
I haven't seen them since the last Mike Rollins we had. I have a lot of pictures of them. They attended every dance for 25 years.
What were their names?
Jim. I can't remember her first name.
Well, it's been a while. It's been a while. Another thing I wanted to talk about, Martha, was you took a run for city council in the late 80s, I believe it was, 87 or 88. Why? You were running a dance studio. You had done it for 50 years at that point. Why did you decide to run for office?
Because I loved Marion. I wanted to do something for Marion. My sister and I went to every house in 4E. That's from the west side of South Prospect Street, clear down to the railroad tracks on Bellefontaine Avenue. And then the north and south was Columbia Street, north. South was Marion Avenue. We went to every house. Grace and I did.
Unfortunately, it was a close election. Unfortunately, you didn't win. When election night came, what'd you think? What'd you feel?
Well, I was at the Republican headquarters, and when I lost, I said, that's what Jesus wants to happen.
Did you ever give any thought to running again?
Well, when the fourth ward lady that passed away not too long ago, I thought to myself, I really should go up to the Republican headquarters and tell them I want to do that. But I got to thinking about it, and I thought, no, I've got 26 grandchildren. 9 of them are greats, and I got to be a great-grandma.
At 81, though, you still want to do stuff like that.
I just love city council. I don't watch all of their meetings.
What would you like to do for Marion if you could?
Well, do you know what I'm going to do come June?
What's that, Martha?
I'm going to call the Harding High School and get a hold of the man, and I'm going to tell him I want to make some money for the fire department and the police department. I want to have a charity ball.
You know, speaking back, because we don't have those anymore, we had them for so many years. Martha, right now, coming up this November here in 2012, there is a tax issue on the ballot for Marion that they say is going to help raise money for the firefighters and police officers. Do you support that or not?
Well, just so they get help.
Yeah. So
we need help. There's nothing like our fire department. I just love the firemen.
So in November, you'll vote for that tax increase?
Well, tell me about it.
Well, coming in November, it's going to be a 0.25 tax increase. And the people in town, Jack Kellogg, Mayor Schertzer, Mary Ellen Withrow, at this point are all for it to help fund some of the money lost for the police department and the fire. So would you vote for that?
If they do it, I'll do it. By all means. I think an awful lot of the people you just mentioned.
Oh, there we go.
If they're going to do it, I will be right behind them.
Well, your name carries some weight, Martha. So I think that it's become a Republican and a Democrat thing. Martha, in 2002, you talked about it. Joe passed away. What's it been like since he's not been here for about 10 years now?
Well, I lost the best dance partner in the world. Nobody could ever dance like Joe Maniaci. We did every follies that the Junior Service Guild had. And we did waltz, We did swing. I had all my family, Marilyn, Russ, Luann and Kevin, Joe and I, and Ted and Marlene Temple. And I gave them free lessons if they danced with our family. You know what they do for me now, Scott?
What's that?
They mow my yard.
Well, they
take care of all my stuff that I need because they won't take any money because I was too good to them.
Well, how nice. Martha, what made Joe such a good dancer?
Taking a lesson from your fasting.
Mm.
And he danced with me all the time. I had a wonderful babysitter, 3 of them. We lived at 203 St. James. That was our house when we got married. Do you know what?
What's that?
His dad, Chris Maniaci, paid $10,000 for our house and gave it to us for our wedding.
Well, how nice.
Isn't he something?
He is something. But I bet he was. You know, Martha, it's interesting. People obviously looking at this right now can see the sequins and the crown and the glasses and the boas, and people have seen you for years. I think everybody thinks it's great. Where did that sense of fashion come from?
Dancing with the wonderful Joe Maniaci.
Was he a colorful guy?
Oh, he was wonderful. He was special. And when he did dancing with me, we did lifts. I sat up on his shoulder. I had my hands like this. He twirled me round and round and round. When he got ready to leave me off, he bent over and I slid down his back. He brought me over. I did a curtsy. He brought me over, did another curtsy. And he was my buddy.
I bet so, Martha.
Oh, when I lost him, I lost something special.
Martha, what kind of wife were you, would you say?
Well, I had wonderful babysitters every day at 3:30, Monday through Friday. I had her fix dinner. Joe came home and ate dinner at 3:30 in the afternoon. He had a grocery store that he was very involved with. His dad and his mother and Joe ran the store, corner of Silver and Cass. And he came home, and the kids, the girls, all came home from school and we ate together. I had to do that to be with my family because I taught till real late at night.
What kind of mother are you?
Well, I tried to teach them how to dance. At 2 years old, I started all 3 girls. And one lady said to me, "You can't teach your own how to dance." I said, "Well, I make a mind at everything else they do. Why can't I?" And I did. I showed her that I could.
And they've all run studios.
And when they were 12 years old, they helped their mother teach dance, baton, tumbling, cheerleading. And Joe and I taught the ballroom.
Now, Martha, you also had a son pretty late in life, in your 40s.
44.
What was that like?
Well, Scott, I thought I was having the change of life. There was nobody many more happier than I was when I produced Joseph Anthony Maniaci III. And Joe loved it. He wanted a boy with every one of our 3 girls, and he never had it.
Were you a strict mom? Are you a nice mom? What kind of mom were you?
Oh, I loved the way they helped me dance. I was good.
Yeah.
I had a studio then where my family room is right now. It was a backyard, and then the house was separate. I bought them a beautiful little house, just darling, and they played out there. They loved that play yard. And I had a girl, she was 16, she came down and just loved my 2 daughters. That's when I had Luann and Susie. I didn't have Susie yet, Luann and Marilyn. She came down from Girard Avenue and said, "Martha, is there any way I could help you teach dancing?" I said, "Well, Deirdre, Isn't that a pretty name, Deidre Harris? I'll let you help me. I need some help. She helped, and she turned out to be the neatest girl, and she helped me learn We Are the Kids from Martha Douce you hear so much about. You know that song, don't you, Sean?
Yes, I do, Martha.
Martha, what kind of dance teacher were you? Do you have to be strict? Can you be easy?
Well, you have to care about your students and always give them a treat. If they do good, they get a treat. I spent a lot of money getting treats.
That's so. Martha, in 2011, you were elected Grand Marshal of the Popcorn Parade, the 31st Annual Popcorn Parade. What was that like?
Well, I told Mary Dutton that she could not have done anything any nicer for me, and I also told her Scott Spears was the whole reason. On all of your television shows, you said everybody should vote for Martha Douce. And they did. And another thing you did, you've done a lot for Martha Maniaci. You put my picture in City Hall.
Well, it should be there.
Do you know how nice that is? I saw Joe Ione's wife yesterday at the Y.
Mm-hmm.
And she and I was talking about her husband and me hanging in the City Hall next to the elevator.
I saw that picture not too long ago. Well, you deserved it, Martha. At 81, what keeps you going? You have more energy than most 81-year-olds.
Well, I'm still teaching dance. And I sit out in the office and I talk, and I love to talk, can you tell?
I do, but it works for you. Years from now, because I think you've got a lot of years left in you, Martha, how would you like to be remembered by your students and people in Marion?
I can't go any place, including just a little bit ago. I ran across a student. They'd tell me their names. Oh, you don't know the people that have danced for me.
How would you like to have them remember you?
Just Martha Douce, the Catholic and Republican.
And a dancer.
Oh, yes.
And a dancer, absolutely. Now, Martha, I wanted to ask you something before we got out of here. You talked about the Grand March. How do you do the Grand March?
Well, you get Joe at the south end and me at the north end of the Coliseum. Joe gets a couple. The man on the girl's left, a man and a woman, they march down the floor to me. And all these couples are lined up all the way back. The first couple gets up, I send them that way. They walk around and go back to Joe. The second couple goes this way, all the way back to Joe. Joe puts them together, two couples, four people. Four people march up to me. I send them this way, they go back to Joe. The second four come this way, back to Joe. On and on. Then there's 8 people. All 8 march up, send 8 of them this way, 8 of them that way. Then there's 32. 16, I mean. They do that till there's 32 people across. There's all these lines of 32 people. I take the head couple here. I walk clear around the Coliseum until we make a circle.
I'm not sure I could follow that, Martha. That's complicated.
Yes, you could. It's so easy as all you need to do is walk.
Martha, the last thing I want to do here, you gave us a little tease with it earlier on. You wrote the song, We Are the Kids from Martha Douce. What year did you write that?
62.
62. Do you want to end with that?
Will you help me?
Go right on. I'll try, Martha.
Okay, 1, 2, ready, go.
We are the kids from Martha Douce you hear so much about. The people stop and stare at us whenever we go out. We're noted for our dancing and the many things we do. Most everybody likes us and we hope you like us too, I do. As we go dancing and the music starts to play, hooray, rah, you will see us dancing
Martha Douce is here to stay. Hooray, raw! Hip,
What?
hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray!
Now, I want you to zoom in on Martha before we get out here, because I want you to remember this. Take a good long look, Marion and everybody else who's watching this. For however long it lasts, and I hope it's a long time, you're not going to see Martha Douce's like again. Thank you, Martha.